Don't be a donkey, right? If hard work was the key to success, the donkey would run the farm. Important thing is that we as coaches are smart farmers, but we also teach our athletes how to farm. Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. This episode will mark the first solo episode of the podcast's existence. Typically at the year end, we'll do a year-end reflection and contemplation, but this will be the first solo episode. So, I didn't really know what I wanted to talk about, but as we are now wrapping up the season, obviously some teams are playing at the National Hockey League level still. Obviously, the season hasn't ended, but college hockey is coming to an end. Youth hockey has come to an end. I want to talk about programming and specifically this 3-day rollover programming that we use at Donskov Conditioning called our Gain, Go, and Grow model. But let me back up for a second because I think this is a really important touch point. I tell all of our young athletes now, and with all of the resources and all of the extracurricular activities at the conclusion of hockey season, it's really, really easy to get wrapped up in doing too much. I can't believe it. Rewind back, and I'm older now, of course, but rewind back 15 years ago, and the season would end and tryouts would start, in August. You'd have almost 3 to 4 months for young athletes to either play other sports or grow into their bodies. And in some cases, during these sensitive years, anywhere between the ages of 11 and 16, you might grow 3 inches and gain 20 pounds. That doesn't happen anymore. Season ends, tryouts are 2 or 3 weeks later, you're right into spring ice, then you have summer ice, and the next season begins. So there is no bridge. It is just constant. So I've started talking to our young athletes and our pro and advanced level athletes as well, and it's kind of an interesting time right now to be a performance coach. But I've used this analogy a lot with them, and the saying is that if hard work was a key to success, the donkey would run the farm. Now, nobody's saying don't work hard. Nobody's saying don't put your time in, but you've got to work smart. More is not better. Better is better. I also talk to our athletes about a rifle-like approach as opposed to a shotgun approach. Understand what it is that you want to focus on to become a better hockey player. At the youth level, it's probably just basic strength. But at the higher end levels, what is it? Is it puck touch? Is it shot? Is it release? Is it first touch on a retrieval? Is it first step speed? What are those areas that you want to focus on? And then the goal is, whether you're a youth or advanced level athlete, is don't think what you can add to your schedule, but think what can you take away? Trim the fat, right? Trim the fat. And those are elements now that I've started to talk to our athletes about. I hadn't been able to do that 10, 15 years ago because this didn't really exist. And now it's become a snowball effect of just constant, whether it's 3-on-3 pond hockey, spring sessions, summer ice, power school, power skating, speed school, speed skating. I mean, the resources are just mounting. So I think it's really important to step back and think a less is better approach. What can I do to get better? Trim the fat. So we're talking about programming and considerations for hockey players, specifically this idea of a 3-day rollover program. Let me start by saying where I got this idea from. Really, 3 people were really responsible for implanting the seed on thinking 3 days as opposed to a traditional 4-day rollover program. Those individuals were Joe Ken in his book, The Tier Training Program, or the Tier System. Buddy Morse, an interview that I heard many, many years ago from Robbie Bork, made me stop in my tracks and reconsider. And then my friend and mentor, Coach Dan Paff. That's where I first heard of a 3-day rollover program, from Coach Paff. In essence, a 3-day rollover for his track athletes, and I'm paraphrasing, consists of 3 days to maintain fitness qualities, enabling athletes to train more according to how they feel and less strict observance of a rigid program design. His microcycle consisted of day 1, explosive emphasis, acceleration. Day 2, elastic, technical speed runs. And day 3, more an endurance base. Okay, so I thought to myself, how could we do that for hockey players? How can we take that same model for hockey players? What can we add to that program? How would it look for a team sport athlete, not a track and field athlete? So before I get in the meat and potatoes of our 3-day rollover, which is called Gain, Go, and Grow, it's built on 3 pillars. So it's important to understand the foundation before we talk about the components. Number 1, it's built on what we call diversification of stress, right? If I gave you $1 million to put in a portfolio, you wouldn't invest in one stock. Most likely you would invest in multiple stocks because it would downsize your risk. Well, with our Gain, Grow, and Go model, we diversify what we call our stress portfolio. And I'm going to explain that. The second is what we call micro planning. So we're able to be much more fluid in our program design. Athletes are on vacation, athletes miss. We know what we're going after and the qualities that we're going after day in and day out in our Gain, Go, Grow model. So in essence, we can piecemeal a program weekly as opposed to annually, right? Or a monthly, whatever it may be. And then the last one is what we call complementary training. Peanut butter and jelly, not peanut butter and pickles. So when we talk about programming this 3-day rollover, we want to think what can complement training means in the weight room with either our jump training, our speed work, or our energy system work. So we're able to create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay. Now, who would we use this 3-day rollover for? For our young athletes, typically for us would be a traditional linear periodized program, right? We increase the intensity over time. We decrease the volume. Typically, it's a 4-day rollover, a 4-day split program. Okay. We started getting this idea where we thought, for our pro and advanced level athletes, the most important thing for them is their ice touches and skill work. And we want to sprinkle that strength and conditioning in, but we don't want to interrupt that, right? No one's suggesting that strength and conditioning isn't important, not at all. But if you want to get great at playing the guitar, you got to play the guitar. And if you look at the stresses on the ice, there's been some great research by Pearsall et al. In looking at linear position transducers on the skate boot, run to glide in hockey, 200 times body weight on one skate blade when you're in the run. When you get into glide, 180. So that's a lot of stress on the system. And one would argue that the forces on the ice far exceed that in the weight room, right? So we need to be able to balance that. So we thought, how can we create a program where we've got complementary training means, we can micro plan the summer, and we can diversify our stress portfolio. Again, this was born out of 3 gentlemen's ideas, and this is how we combine it to create our 3-day rollover, which is called our Gain, Go, and Grow model. Today's episode has been brought to you by Physical Preparation for Ice Hockey, Biological Principles and Practical Solutions, and the Gain, Go, Grow manual. This is a 2-part book series exploring training the intermediate and advanced level players. Book number 1 explores training the intermediate player. Chapters include long-term athletic development, considerations, speed training, power training, strength training, and program design. The Gain, Go, Grow manual explores training the high-performance hockey player. Chapters include biomechanics of ice hockey, considerations for high performers, minimizing adaptational risks while upsizing gains, the Gain, Go, Grow model, and example microcycles. More information can be found at Amazon.com. Day 1, gain, lift heavy things slow. So our goal there is really peak strength, right? We want to really focus on what we would call max effort method. So lifting heavy things slowly. We would complement that before we started lifting with acceleration work, right? 10-meter sprints. Maybe that's half kneeling. Maybe it's on their bellies. Maybe it's lean, drop, and drive. But again, 10-meter sprints, larger foot contact profiles. Before we got into the guts of the program, meaning our lifting, we would also have our complementary jump training. We would have higher impulse plyometrics, so jump and stick. Maybe it's jumping on a box and sticking. Maybe it's jumping over a hurdle. and sticking. But again, higher impulse foot profiles. And then we would focus on our max strength work. Okay. That's our gain day. We would show a picture of our athletes on that program like an elephant, lift heavy things slow, right? Our go day, we would have a picture on our workout of a cheetah. So they know the theme of the day. That is lift submaximal things very, very fast, right? And again, what we would do to pair that, to have that complementary training means is before the athletes would lift, they would focus on timed speed work, anywhere from 20 upwards of 30 meters in sprints. I'll digress here in our sprint work. We slowly build up over time in the summers to approximately 300 total meters in one session. And that's going to be a combination of 10s, 20s, 30s, and we'll undulate those over time. So an athlete week one of the summer might start at 90 total yards and build up to 300 in a session. Now, 300, why is that the sweet spot? Really isn't. We have 90 minutes with our pros. And as you can appreciate, the rest for speed work, 1 minute per 10 meters of length. So we've got to give the appropriate amount of rest to really focus on true speed work. We'll also have on our go day true stretch shortening plyos. We'll talk about minimal ground contact time. So, hurdle height certainly not the proxy this day, right? Small hurdles, quick ground contact times might be a drop jump. It might be a true single leg pogo jump. We would pair that also with our warm-ups. We use the Altus Rudiment Series warm-up, right? So all of these things take place before the athletes touch weights, all right? When we do touch weights, linear position transducers, so we will have our gym aware set up. If we're doing loaded jumps, it's 1 to 1.3 meters per second plus, focusing on a speed of contraction, right? If we're doing a foundational pattern, it's 0.75 meters plus. So submaximal weight, the goal is true intent on the concentric portion. Okay. So that's our cheetah day or our go day. And then our grow day, that is lift submaximal weight for time. Now, what would we do to complement that day? We would have even larger impulse jump training. So if you look at ground contact profiles for jump training, obviously your true stretch shortening, which is going to be your quickest, would be in the middle of the week, right? That's your go day. The first day of the week, jump and stick in a linear fashion, right? And that last day, that grow day, is more of your bounding work. Why? Again, increase contact or ground contact time. We may also do some repeat sprint work on that day at the very end because we're complementing what we do with our weight touches. When we do weight train, though, I'm a big fan of density work, the 30 for 30 by Pat Davidson in his mass program, pyramid type work where we're getting high density with time for our athletes with submaximal weight. And we'll also do something what we call Parkinson's Law, where the time that you have to do work, if we decrease that time and expect the same amount of work, we'll get more density in our program. So that idea of Parkinson's Law. So we might take something like an escalating density and say, hey, you did 7 rounds in 15 minutes last time. Well, now you get 14 minutes. The expectation is get just as many rounds of work. So we're building density. We specifically program that last day so the athletes have 48 to 72 hours before they see us on a Monday. Okay, that is our 3-day rollover program. We like this because it allows athletes on their off days, Tuesdays or Thursdays, to do one of two things. Focus on their ice touches, their skill work. Maybe it's their wall work. Maybe it's their first touch. Maybe it's their first step. But they can focus on the skill of being an elite hockey player. If they don't do that, we've got other means of recovery and regeneration. Maybe it's tempo runs. Maybe it's aerobic circuits. The other thing I think is really important here when you think about higher end athletes for this gain, go, grow model is they have higher training ages. So we talk to young coaches about this all the time. If you take a traditional lift like a trap bar deadlift, and I ask a young Tommy for 3 sets of 8 and he can bust 3 sets of 8 out, I don't want to do that with an elite athlete. I have to give him more intensity and spread his volume out. So maybe it's not 3 sets of 8 for young Tommy. Maybe it's 8 sets of 3 Either way, though, he's got to use heavier weight to trip the homeostatic wire. That comes at a physiological cost. So in this gain, go, grow model, we have built-in restoration and recovery on those Tuesdays and Thursdays. Maybe it is tempo work. Maybe it is aerobic work. Maybe it's seeing a manual therapist, or maybe it is skill work on the ice. Notice I didn't say conditioning work on the ice. So we really like that model. We really like the gain, go, grow. It's less touches in the weight room, but we get better bang for our buck, and we're able to focus on the skill work, which is playing the guitar for hockey players. Reminder here, foundational principles in our 3-day rollover. Diversify the stress portfolio. Lift heavy things slow, lift submaximal weight fast, lift submaximal weight for time. That's diversifying the portfolio. Okay. The second one is micro planning, the ability to change on the fly if needed, as opposed to a rigid program where our pro athletes are on vacation, they come in and out. So we're able to have that micro planned approach. And then the last thing that we really like about this is complementing the training means, creating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay. Hey, Anthony, some elite level athletes don't like gain, go, grow. They want to train 4 days a week. No problem. That happens all the time. There's the real world, and then there's reality, right? Reality is that doesn't always happen. So we might have a gain, go. We might have a gain, go, gain, grow. So it just depends, but each day has its theme for our more advanced level athletes. Okay. For our younger athletes, our youth athletes, our 12, 13, 14-year-olds who have a training age that looks like my hairline, we just like a traditional linear periodized program anywhere. If it's a young athlete, 2 touch points a week. If it's an older high school athlete, more of an upper lower split where it's 4 days a week. Okay. But again, in program design, I think the context is so crucially important. Who are we working with? What is their training age? What are their end goals? How can we help them reach their goals? And most of the time for young athletes, the low-hanging fruit is simply strength training. But once we pick that low-hanging fruit, there's marginal gains. How can we continue to evolve and produce results for that person's game? And most of the time, those results continue to occur context environment within the training environment. In this case, it's on the ice. So I think it's really important to understand those ice touches aren't meant to be conditioning skates. They're meant to be skill touches. Okay. So this is really a wrap up of our 3-day rollover program, our gain, go, and grow model, and how we would use that for our more advanced demographic. In this case, athletes that train with us for 6+ years that have had really good coaching and progressive overload, and contrast that against our young athletes and picking up low-hanging fruit with strength training and just a linear periodized progressive overload program. So those are the contrasts. But either way, I strongly urge all of our athletes now to think, cut the fat, don't be a donkey, right? If hard work was the key to success, the donkey would run the farm. Important thing is that we as coaches are smart farmers, but we also teach our athletes how to farm.